Wednesday, June 22, 2016. At around 9 a.m., 75-year-old David Fann leaves his home near Mullen, West Virginia. He is headed to Beckley on what should have been routine and uneventful business. Sadly, the events of that day would be anything but routine. Sometime in the mid-afternoon, a pair of joggers at Lake Stpehens happened upon a lifeless body along one of the trails. The body would later be identified as that of David Fann. He had been stabbed multiple times. Nearly 6 years later, his family and law enforcement still do not know who killed him or why.
It would be crass to describe any homicide as badly timed, as there truly is no time or place for such a thing. However, less than 24 hours after David Fann's body was found, the entire state of West Virginia would be swept up in what was later dubbed the 100-year flood. Local resources were stretched to the breaking point, and as a result, reports concerning the murder of David Fann were either short or non-existent. In spite of the stalled start, the investigation into the murder of David Fann was begun and continues to this day.
At happier times, the rural landscapes and rustic charm of southern West Virginia can be objects of beauty and delight. While evidence of economic woes is still present, it is largely overshadowed by miles of scenic roadways, lush green forests, and recreation sites, both public and private. If you are looking to escape the rat race into something a bit slower and quieter, then you will not be disappointed. Hiking, fishing, rafting, and even ziplining are rarely more than a short drive away. Unfortunately, along with the rural locale often comes a feeling of isolation. As the populations thin and the neighborhoods become increasingly scattered, the feeling of being farther and farther away from help can become pervasive. It is simple arithmetic. You know that the further you travel from a police or fire station, the longer it will take them to respond in case of trouble. Such is the price for breathtaking vistas like this. David Allen Fann was born in Wyoming County, West Virginia, on November 1, 1940. In the 1960s, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and served in Vietnam, where he was once shot down during combat. In 1969, he returned home, married, and eventually earned bachelor's degrees in teaching and business administration at Bluefield State College. But, according to his family, 1 year of teaching was apparently enough to convince David that it was just not his calling in life. David Fann was the epitome of the American entrepreneur. From rental properties to restaurants, he rarely worked for anyone other than himself. Technically an independent contractor by trade, he had a hand in the construction of many buildings and homes in the area. He was not behind with the times either. During the 1980s, he opened and operated a mobile diner that offered everything from arcade games to video rentals. By 2016, David Fann had retired, but that does not mean that he left his investments behind. He still owned and helped to maintain some rental properties and commercial buildings. Like many homicide cases we've profiled, the day of David Fann's murder started as a normal one. David left his home near Mullen at approximately 9 a.m. and drove northeast toward Beckley. He had plans to purchase a new hedge trimmer for use at one of his rental properties. Weather conditions that morning were optimal, so barring heavy traffic, David should have made the drive in approximately 30 minutes. At some point that morning, David stopped in for breakfast at the Tudor's Biscuit World, just west of Beckley on West Virginia Route 3. He next drove to the Harbor Freight Store at the Raleigh Mall, and then south again to Ollie's Bargain Outlet on West Virginia Route 16. At one of these locations, David Fann was captured on security footage, and there reportedly did not appear to be anything out of the ordinary. While the exact time is not known, it is believed that David Fann had finished his errands by around 12:30 p.m. Just what transpired over the next few hours is not known with certainty. David Fann carried no cell phone and therefore had no contact with his family or friends after he left his home. 3.5 hours later, and nearly 12 miles away, two joggers traversing a trail at the southern end of Lake Stpehens came upon the lifeless body of David Fann. Initially thinking he may have been a drunk or passed out on drugs, the two joggers contacted the park's maintenance. They, in turn, called 911, and deputies with the Raleigh County Sheriff's Department were dispatched to the scene. David Fann's body was found in this general area, along the northern edge of a small peninsula just south of the lake's marina. While they actively participated in the creation of this feature, law enforcement have been reticent to reveal many details about the crime scene itself. They did confirm that David Fann died as the result of multiple stab wounds. A canvass of the area surrounding the crime scene turned up no eye or ear witnesses to the murder. Although visible from the beach and shoreline opposite, the area where David Fann's body was found is surrounded by varying layers of foliage. The walking trails in this area wind and branch off in several different directions, allowing for entry and exit from multiple points. These trails, however, are not remote and make up part of a frisbee golf course. The trees along the uneven landscape make the area essentially invisible from the nearest parking lot. That evening, Detectives Corey Suman and Brian Stump delivered the tragic news to the Fann family. A few hours later, the storm, which would go on to wreak havoc on the region for weeks, arrived in all its fury. From the outset, the murder of David Fann was as puzzling as it was tragic. David's family have described him as a creature of habit who, while not bound to a clock, tended to stick to the tasks at hand with little variation. They could think of absolutely no reason why he would have been at Lake Stpehens, and he was not known as one who liked to walk the trails or go sightseeing. In addition, David Fann walked with a pronounced limp, the result of a badly broken left leg, and also suffered from pain in his shoulder. The location where his body was found, here, just off of West Virginia Route 3, was nowhere near what would have been his return route of travel back to Wyoming County. David Fann's vehicle, a blue four-door Toyota Tacoma, West Virginia license number 01E337, was found parked in a semicircular lot overlooking the lake, a short but very uneven walk from where his body was found. His vehicle was found here, parked in a generally western direction and facing away from the lake's overlook. Nothing appeared to be missing or out of the ordinary when the vehicle was later returned to his family. Photos taken at the scene on the day of the murder show David's vehicle to be clean and void of any major damage or markings. Curiously, the vehicle's windshield wipers were found stopped mid-cycle, as if the vehicle had been shut down while they were still in motion. Rain and thunderstorms had moved through the general area during the preceding hours. The general area where David Fann's body was located is roughly 200 to 300 feet northeast of the spot where his truck had been parked. Given David's limp and somewhat compromised mobility, the distance and topography from the lot where his truck was found to the crime scene would have made it a difficult path for him to traverse. It certainly would not have been a trek he would have normally opted to take. Heavy rain had pelted the region on and off during the previous few days, which would have also made the area muddy and even less inviting. Why would David Fann, a man described as a creature of habit and who walked with some difficulty, have gone so far off what would have been his regular course? As with other cases we have covered, the answers may lie in David Fann's actions and movements during the hours leading up to his murder, a time frame of approximately 6 to 7 hours. Piecing together his route of travel, along with corresponding times, may be critical in understanding what happened. The times and locations cited during the following scenarios were graciously provided to Mysterious W.V. by the family of David Fann and Captain Larry Lilly of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Department. To the best of our knowledge, this potentially crucial information is being presented here for the first time. Please follow along closely. We know that David Fann left his home near Mullen, West Virginia, at approximately 9 a.m. That morning, he was dressed in what has been described as normal attire for him: a black T-shirt and khaki cargo shorts, similar to these, black socks, and black shoes. He would have traveled north and east along West Virginia Route 16, a two-lane road which winds its way up through the mountains and joins with West Virginia Route 97 at the town of Sophia. Assuming that David Fann first went to breakfast, he would then have proceeded to the Tudor's Biscuit World, located here, along West Virginia Route 3, approximately a half mile from Route 16. If he was on time, he would have arrived here at approximately 9:30 to 9:40 a.m., perhaps later if traffic was heavy. To reach his next two known stop-offs, David would have then traveled back to West Virginia Route 16, continued north, and then backtracked to the south and west. Harbor Freight, where David Fann is believed to have purchased a hedge trimmer, is located here, approximately 3.6 miles to the north of Tudor's Biscuit World in the Raleigh Mall. David was seen at the Harbor Freight location at approximately 11:07 a.m. It should be noted that U.S. Route 19, which bisects the many stores and strip malls in the area, is prone to heavy, slow-moving traffic, so establishing a definite time of travel between Harbor Freight and Ollie's Bargain Outlet is difficult. Ollie's Bargain Outlet is located just off of West Virginia Route 16, to the south and west of Harbor Freight. It is believed that David Fann arrived at Ollie's Bargain Outlet at 12:10 p.m. and departed at approximately 12:30 p.m. All of the routes and stops thus far would have been normal for David Fann given his plans for the day. Points A, B, C, D, and E are accounted for. It is what happened between points D and E, Ollie's Bargain Outlet, and Lake Stpehens, that is unknown and potentially crucial. Given that the exact timing of events is open to question, let us instead focus on David's possible routes of travel from here, Ollie's Bargain Outlet, to here, the southern end of Lake Stpehens. Avoiding unimproved roadways and assuming no detours, there are at least 4 possible ways the trip can be made. The fastest but less direct route would have had David leaving Ollie's Bargain Outlet and turning onto Pikeview Drive, driving parallel to I-6477, and then turning right onto West Virginia Route 3 just before it bisects the interstate highway. Route 3 then continues in a generally western direction and passes through the communities of Harper, Eccles, Baylor, and finally Surveyor. David would then have entered the Lake Stpehens Park and driven less than a mile to this arc-shaped parking area at one of the lake's overlooks. A slightly longer but more direct route of travel would have had David leaving Ollie's Bargain Outlet and driving south on West Virginia Route 16 before turning right onto West Virginia Route 3. He would then have followed West Virginia Route 3 to the interstate, again passing Tudor's Biscuit World, and then proceeded in the same manner as the previous route. Conversely, David could have left Ollie's Bargain Outlet and continued south on West Virginia Route 16 until it reached Interstate 6477. He would then have traveled north on the interstate, taken exit 44 northbound, and then turned left onto West Virginia Route 3. A fourth, but far less likely scenario would have had David leaving Ollie's Bargain Outlet and again traveling north on West Virginia Route 16 before merging onto U.S. Route 19. He would then have made his way north, again passing the Harbor Freight Store, to the combined Interstate 6477 and taken exit 44 to again place him on West Virginia Route 3. This route, however, would have subjected David to far heavier traffic and also involved the paying of a toll to allow for the short travel south on the interstate. While there are, of course, numerous variations and alternatives, these possible routes of travel are by far the best options available, assuming that one is looking to drive directly to Lake Stpehens. If we then assume that David left Ollie's Bargain Outlet at approximately 12:30 p.m., he could have made the trek to Lake Stpehens in as little as 21 minutes. Again, however, the region is known for heavy traffic and frequent delays, so getting from Ollie's to the convergence point of all four routes, here at Interstate 6477, could have extended the time significantly, especially during the noon hour through 2 p.m. Conservatively, we will estimate that the time required to travel from Ollie's Bargain Outlet to Lake Stpehens as 35 minutes. While the time frame is subject to considerable fluctuations, a 12:30 p.m. departure from Ollie's Bargain Outlet would have placed David Fann and his blue Toyota Tacoma along West Virginia Route 3 between I-6477 and Lake Stpehens between 12:45 p.m. and sometime prior to 4 p.m. when his body was found. A large window of time stretched over many miles. This supposition, however, does not take into account the possibility that David Fann could have made other, previously undocumented stops during the succeeding hours. The portion of West Virginia Route 3 from exit 44 to Lake Stpehens, the common denominator in each scenario, is far less traveled. Although not impossible, it is difficult to construct a scenario where this stretch of road is not used to permit entry to the Lake Stpehens area. Crime Stoppers of West Virginia later offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the identity of David Fann's killer. Today, this reward remains in effect.
Law enforcement remain hopeful and feel that this case may be no more than a single phone call away from a successful resolution. They would be interested in hearing from anyone who may have been at Lake Stpehens on June 22, 2016, or who may have seen David Fann and his blue Toyota Tacoma along West Virginia Route 3 or any of the other roads leading from U.S. Route 19 to Interstate Exit 44. To that end, the Raleigh County Sheriff's Department has asked that you pay extra close attention to the times and locations in this summation.
David Allen Fann was last seen at approximately 12:10 p.m. on Wednesday, June 22, 2016. The date would best be remembered as the day before the area was struck by massive storms and flooding. That day, David left his home near Mullen, West Virginia at approximately 9 a.m. and drove to Beckley along West Virginia Route 16. He is known to have stopped for breakfast at the Tudor's Biscuit World on either West Virginia Route 3 or possibly this now defunct location along West Virginia Route 16. At 11:07 a.m., David arrived at the Harbor Freight Store on U.S. Route 19 in the Raleigh Mall complex. He later drove south and west to Ollie's Bargain Outlet on West Virginia Route 16, where he was last seen. The time was approximately 12:10 p.m. The day he was murdered, David Fann was attired in a black T-shirt and khaki cargo shorts similar to these, black socks, and black shoes. David Fann's body was found along a walking trail on the northern side of a peninsula situated on the southern end of Lake Stpehens, approximately 14 miles west of Beckley. He had been stabbed multiple times. His truck, a blue four-door Toyota Tacoma, was found parked in this semicircular parking lot overlooking the lake's southern shore. David could have made the trip from Beckley to the lake parking lot in as little as 21 minutes. The period of time from when David completed his errands to when his body was found, roughly 12:30 p.m. to approximately 4 p.m., is of particular interest to law enforcement. They would be very interested in hearing from anyone who can help to document David Fann's actions and locations during this time frame. It is unknown if David drove himself to Lake Stpehens, or if he met with foul play elsewhere and was driven or forced to drive there. Lake Stpehens is located just off of West Virginia Route 3, a direction of travel which would not have been on David's return route to Wyoming County. His family have also advised that Lake Stpehens was certainly not a location he would have normally frequented. At the time of his death, David was 75 years of age. He walked with some difficulty and with a distinct limp, a limp that would have stood out. He may have been wearing a height-corrective heel or special shoe on his left foot. The walk from where David's truck was parked to the area where his body was found would have been difficult for him to traverse. Again, no one knows for certain if David was alone or in the company of another person or persons when he arrived at the lake. If you have any information concerning the murder of David Fann, or feel you may have seen David Fann or his vehicle on June 22, 2016, please contact Captain Larry Lilly with the Raleigh County, West Virginia Sheriff's Department at 304-255-9300.